So last year, I did a ranking looking at some of the emotional speeches from Doctor Who. And I put the speech from the end of this episode at number one. But I have a question now. Can a really, really good speech make up for a very average episode? Let's discuss it and find out. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kevin, I am a geek, you're watching Kevin the Geek, and we're back for more Doctor Who reviews. This time we are taking a look at Vincent and the Doctor. This is the story featuring Vincent van Gogh. And yeah, I had a lot more positive memories of this movie, this episode, than I do in reality rewatching it. And I would have to say, it's a very average episode. It really has to be said. Like, I said it last week when I did my review for the Silurian two-parter, that through my rewatches, particularly of what I've seen so far, or rewatched so far, and reviewed so far of the Matt Smith era, I'm seeing a lot of times that I'm more remembering certain clips or certain scenes or certain moments more so than I am the entire episode. And that is definitely the case here with Vincent and the Doctor. Now, do not get me wrong, I absolutely love this story that it is trying to tell. I love the metaphors and the deep exploration it takes into the very sensitive and stigmatized issue around mental health. But you can't get away from the fact it's a very average episode if you isolate it from those things. And I do have to say that there's a lot of average stuff in this episode. Amy as the companion, I sort of remembered her being better in this episode than in reality she actually is. And again, is that more for the odd couple of one-liners that she has with Vincent? Because to be perfectly honest, the stuff where she is shown to be trying to push her fascination of Van Gogh and her her wanting him to be better and to him, for example, to be able to paint more paintings and stuff, I didn't buy it. And I don't know whether that was the writing, I don't know whether it's the performance, but there was just something lacking for me. And there was a very crucial bit as well when Vincent is talking with Amy about how you can hide your pain. And he's talking about Amy having a void in her and having effectively lost someone, which is a reference to the fact that in the last episode, Rory got erased from history. And first of all, I do like the very subtle kind of faux pas from the Doctor, kind of mentioning, referring to Van Gogh as Rory at one point, just to kind of dropping that sort of hint that he has remembered Rory even if Amy hasn't, and they were a bit of a I think it's to show that they actually travelled with him a little bit more than they kind of showed in the show at this point. But yeah, when he's like, Amy, I can see your pain, you're hiding a loss, you've lost someone. I was like, really? That's not what I gathered from that at all. And again, is that maybe saying that you kind of have to be someone who's kind of in that mindset to be able to see it? Because that is essentially what the villain was. And the villain was, again, from a symbolic standpoint, it was good, and a metaphorical standpoint, it was great. But for being an actual villain, it was just that. It was more of a metaphor than anything else. And so when I do my scoring in a little bit, you can't really give it that great of a score. You know, yes, from a metaphorical standpoint, it was good, but when you look at it, it was just this sort of weird reptilian chicken thing, and you just couldn't see it, and it was just there to be that representation, which just that on its own, I don't think it's enough to get a great score as a villain. But a lot of the other stuff, you know, your music, the special effects, the set, the costumes, they again were average. Although I will say for the set, you know, I do like the fact that obviously production-wise they would have bundled this up with the Venice two-parter, because this was also filmed in Croatia, where they kind of found a town called Trogir, and they were sort of able to utilize it to look a little bit like Venice, and they repurposed it here to look a little bit like France. And I think the being able to take a painting of a real life place that Vincent van Gogh would have gone to, and they were basically able to sort of recreate it, I thought that was pretty good. But I would say the dialogue and the story is the driving point of this story. Even the Doctor was not as amazing as he has been, but it was still pretty good in the episode. But it was really a story all about Van Gogh. And Van Gogh, as a painter, is a hard one for me, because I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm a person who has appreciation for stereotypical art. Obviously, art takes many forms, particularly in the modern day. You know, a movie, for me, can be a work of art. A TV show can be a work of art. A piece of music, a drawing, a piece of graffiti. They're all various different things that can be a piece of art. And paintings is not one that I necessarily say I have a huge amount of interest in. Watching this for the first time, I didn't know much about Van Gogh other than the fact he had cut his ear off. I didn't know that he really suffered from any kind of mental ill health. And I think the episode did a good job in being educational enough to allow people to understand what the man would have gone through at the time, the lack of self-worth, the lack of appreciation in his art. But they really tried to hammer home the importance of his work and the beauty of his work. And I'm going to be honest, I look at his paintings, I think, that's a pretty picture. But I don't really see more than that, for me personally. You may disagree. So when you bring in an actor like Bill Nighy, with the esteem and the prestige that he has as an actor, he feels wasted, because the one and only single purpose that they had was to ensure that you had an actor who you would pay attention enough to listen to the words that he is saying. And ultimately, yes, I do agree that the stuff that he says, particularly in that end sequence, which is, you know, top tier, it's an amazing sequence at the end of this episode where Vincent gets taken to the future and he sees the legacy of his work. It is very important dialogue that is written, But the fact that when they spoke about it in, the behind the scenes documentary, the Doctor Who Confidential, and they say basically we need to make sure that people are listening, and therefore we needed an actor with the prestige to make sure that you are paying attention. That says it all. It says it all about your opinions of the people in the audience who are going to be watching this, and your perceived kind of view of their intelligence. So I don't think that was necessarily the right way to go about it. Bill Nye as a character was fantastic, and deserved a better role for me personally in Doctor Who. But again, that's just my personal opinion. But yeah, that final sequence was great, and I tell you what, the one thing I am so glad of is that they didn't do what some people would have maybe expected, what Amy expected in that moment. To say, we've taken this person who is chronically depressed, who doesn't value his own self-esteem, his own self-worth. We take him to the future, we get him to see his legacy, and therefore we expect him to not have killed himself and to have created more paintings. It is a case that, as Vincent says in the episode, you have good days and you have bad days. And just because you're in a good place one day doesn't automatically mean that you are cured. And so I think the importance of showing that you can show good stuff, but the outcome could potentially still remain. I just think that was really important. And I've mentioned it so many times on the channel. I am a humongous advocate of positive mental health. And I implore anybody who is having any kind of difficulties to try to reach out. And I know it's difficult. I've been in that place recently, last year and the year before that. It's been a couple of years where I've had my ups and I've had my downs. But it's doing stuff like this that keeps me going. This is me finding my beauty. This is me as Van Gogh. He found expression through his paintings. This is me finding expressions through doing Doctor Who reviews and reactions and giving you my personal viewpoints. And for me, I find this incredibly therapeutic in a way. It's a strange thing, but anyone who goes through a difficult time, focus on what is good for you. But I now have to rank this episode, and I do that by scoring 10 categories, a score out of 10, to give an overall score out of 100. So let's see what the scores and the grade will be for Vincent and the Doctor. So Vincent and the Doctor has scored 69 points out of 100, which gives it a grade of a B-. This is an episode that the ending is fantastic. The middle, it's neither here nor there. The start is pretty decent. But to be a good episode of Doctor Who, you have to do better in many different aspects. But that doesn't mean that this is not an important story and has an important message. Please, if you ever do struggle, please reach out to whoever you can in whatever way you can and just try to look after yourself the best you can. And remember, you are not alone. That's going to do it for this week's review of Doctor Who. Next week, we're going to have the review of The Lodger. And then on the Saturday next week, we are also going to have a classic Doctor Who reaction, where I check out the second serial from the first Doctor's era. The one sometimes known as the Dead Planet, sometimes the Mutant, but most commonly known as the Daleks. So stay tuned for me for that. And check out the rest of my content. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, but of course drop your comments down below. But for today, my name's Kevin. I am a geek, and you've been watching Kevin the Geek. Goodbye.